And mining billionaire and prospective parliamentarian Clive Palmer joined us just a short time ago from Papeete in Tahiti to discuss his political ambitions. Clive Palmer, thanks for joining us.
Yahurana from Tahiti Nui.
Have you decided what seat you'll be nominating for?
I'd like to stand in a seat where the people know me and I know them, and where we've got a long history. In the seat of Fairfax up the Sunshine Coast, I've held a house there for over 10 years, and of course the Palmer Coolum Resort is the largest private employer on the Sunshine Coast, and we want to create 2,000 jobs in that area, so that's an exciting area. Up in North Queensland, we're also the largest private employer, and I've been very active in the community there. We've given around about $1 million a year to the community for charity. Those people up there know that I'm serious. They know that I want the best for all Australians. So they're the two major areas I'm looking, the seat of Kennedy and maybe the seat of Fairfax.
How and when do you believe this will be resolved, Clive Palmer?
Well, it's very much in the hands of the people of Australia and the people of those seats and the LNP when they're going to call for nominations for those seats, or that's what I really have to wait for. It's in their hands, not mine, and of course I'll be waiting very cautiously, and hopefully that they'll call for nominations and I can serve the country.
Have you got serious support in the Queensland branch to get the nomination in either of those places? Because the federal leader seems to be running against you, or against you running, I should say.
Well, that's news to me. I know that Tony Abbott said some things about door knocking being important, and it is. I've door knocked in more than 4 million doors since 1969, and I know if he needs help, I'm happy to go down to Sydney to help him day for day to door knock his electorate. Let's do it for a week or so together so we can make sure that seat stays Liberal. I'm happy to go to the bus stops and stand with Tony and give him a hand if he doesn't want to door knock. I'm happy to do that.
He's not only talking about door knocking, he says you've got to support party policy, and he stressed this, all of it. Does that rule you out?
Well, of course, the Liberal Party policy is where you can vote with your conscience at any time. That's been the fundamentals of liberalism. And of course I do support Liberal Party policy. I may not support the idea of having paid political lobbyists, many people that take money, influencing our leaders. I don't believe that's a good thing, or holding official positions, but that's not party policy in a policy sense. It's about ethics and about proprietary. And on that, I think the people of Australia support my position.
But that's just one policy. I mean, there are other party policies you don't support. You've been a vocal critic of offshore processing and towing back the boats, which are key elements of Tony Abbott's policy in those areas. Are you prepared to turn around, to do an about-turn on those issues?
I'm prepared to influence the national debate and the debate in the Liberal Party. I've been a member of the Liberal National Parties a lot longer than Tony Abbott has been. I've been to a lot more conferences than he's been, and a participator in much more policy than he's been. He knows that. I'm sure he'll take my advice on certain things.
All right, we'll come back to your other issues with Tony Abbott in a moment. First, why would you consider going up against Bob Katter in Kennedy? He's one of the most popular members in any seat in the country.
Well, I think if you stand for Parliament, for anyone, they should stand for places where the people know them, where they've had a long history and they can make judgments of them. And of course I've got a strong commitment to the people of North Queensland. I mean, in many polls that they've had me as the most popular North Queenslander. And, that's something that I can contribute to the Liberal Party. If we could win that seat of Kennedy, if I was standing, that would be a great contribution. And of course, Bob Katter's fought a very tough campaign. He's nearing 70 years of age now. No doubt he wants to move on. But I'm happy. I'm sure he'll be there. And I think he's a person that's contributed a lot to Australia. And I would do my best to contribute to Australia too if I was successful. And I decided to stand for Kennedy.
He's on a margin of 18.3%. He's been there, as you say, for 20 years. But would you agree that if it happened, this would be one of the strangest electoral contests in the whole election?
Well, I wouldn't think so. I think that it's a challenge of ideas. It's about bringing Bob Katter's ideas to the forefront and mine and putting them together and letting the people decide. For the Liberal Party, it would be a major contribution if we could win that seat. I mean, all of Australia is concerned about the role of independence. I know Bob's supported the coalition, and full credit to him for doing that. And I just want to say that I think the days of independence are over. This is a very stark time for our nation. We've got to stand firm against the forces that are bringing us down and push this country forward to a new frontier. It's time for a change.
I imagine that money would be no object. How much are you prepared to spend of your personal resources to win a seat?
Well, I don't think that's the most important ingredient. I think the most important ingredient is what you've got to serve and your credentials. I certainly would you contribute to the campaign, but I've already, as I said, given nearly $1 million in North Queensland every year to a whole range of charities because I believe it's good for the community.
Now, there are no financial limits, however, on how much an individual can spend on his own campaign. Bob Katter will no doubt argue, for example, it's not fair that a rich man could attempt to buy himself a seat in Parliament.
Well, I'm sure he wouldn't argue that. As I don't want to buy a seat in Parliament. I just want to put forward my view as a citizen of this country, a member of the Liberal National Party for 43 years. Can you deny me my rights as a citizen of Australia just because I've been successful in life? It hasn't been my fault. I'm sorry about that, but I've done the best I can. I've saved 1,000 jobs at Yabulu when BHP was going to close that plant. I'm sure every one of those people, strong supporters of the ALP, a lot of them, no doubt appreciate that and they know that I'm fair dinkum. A lot of people say things, but I do things. We've given away 55 Mercedes-Benz in the first year, 1,500 holidays to Fiji for ordinary Australians because we cared about the contribution they'd made. Few people know what it's like to stand in a long line at a process plant and think that you're not important. To go home and see your wife at night, look across the tea table and not know whether you've got a job or can pay for the presents of the kids at Christmas. So we took the decisions. We went there and fought for those people and saved their jobs. We're still doing it. And we still want to fight for all Australians, that they have a good future. Not now, but in the future. Not just for them, but for their children and their grandchildren. I can't see what's wrong with that. I don't think anybody else in Parliament has made that sort of commitment with billions of dollars to create jobs in this country and take the risks that I've taken so that we can have a stronger nation.
What about that other potential Clive Palmer Fairfax takeover? And I'm talking now about the seat of Fairfax. Alex Somerley is retiring, so you'd imagine there'd be a tremendous number of candidates for a seat like that where there's almost a guarantee of getting into Parliament. Do you have LNP state support for that seat?
Well, I'm a life member of the LNP in Queensland. I was chosen to be their delegate at the federal conference. I've religiously followed their resolution that was passed through State Council. So I would think that some people would support me in the Queensland organisation. Whether it's enough to win the endorsement for Fairfax, who knows? But that's what we want. The whole Liberal National Party, the LNP, win, the more candidates we have standing in our seats. I'm happy that there's over 12 candidates standing in Petrie. I'm happy now that Lilley has got more candidates than it had before. I'm happy that Wayne Swan is looking not as well as he was, but I must say on a personal note, he does need a holiday, and I'd like to give him a week's holiday at the Palmer Resort for him and his family, because politics is not the only thing that's important. And if he wants to go up there on me, it's no problem. Just ring up our manager and we'll have the best suite in the place for him. And who knows, while he's having a holiday, the economy may improve. Anything could happen.
OK. Now, Lilley was your preferred seat. Now, you wanted to take on Wayne Swan. He now says you're running away from that fight. What actually happened? Well,
what actually happened was that we got enormous support. I had 3,700 letters written to me, 3,000 people offering to work in the campaign, major candidates coming forward. The LNP will tell you, on the day I announced my expression of interest for Lilley, they got nearly double the nominations throughout the state. What a great thing for the LNP that I've been able to do that. Have a talk to Brad Henderson, the State Director. I'm sure he'll tell you that. We've got more support. And I listened to what Tony Abbott said. He said, Clive, don't stand for Lilley. I don't want you to stand for Lilley. And, of course, I didn't stand for Lilley because I respect my leader. But as a member of the party, as an ordinary member of the party, I should be able to nominate for some seat. I should be able to throw my hat in the ring with everyone else and see what happens.
All right. Did your now famous enemies in very high places in the LNP, in the Federal Liberal Party generally, did they block your move in Lilley?
No, they didn't. I'm sure they couldn't do that because these people don't live in Queensland. But it was just really that I thought there were good candidates there, and it wasn't a seat that I lived with. Wayne Swan's correct. I didn't live in the electorate. I didn't have
Santo
close ties
Santoro
to it.
lives in Queensland. He's the Vice President.
Oh, well, I'm sure Mr Santoro would agree with me that the more candidates we have for the LNP, the better. He's certainly not a official at the state level, and of course Tony Abbott managed to give Santo Santoro a proxy of his vote, and he's entitled to do that. And I'd do all I could to win over Santo if that was the case of his confidence. I hope he would vote for me. And I hope everyone will.
What started this feud between you and Santo Santoro? Because you actually spoke for him, didn't you, at the launch of his lobbying business?
Well, that's right. I'm not against lobbyists per se. I'm against the fact that lobbyists shouldn't be elected officials of a major political party. I'm not against Santo Santoro. I'm not against any person. I believe all Australians agree with me that most Australians anyway, that we shouldn't be having paid people, lobbyists, as our party officials. Now, that wasn't directed at Mr Santoro, it wasn't directed at Mr Stockdale or Mr Abbott. It was really stating a principle which I wish people would look at. And of course, if a person was a president or a vice president and a lobbyist like Mr Santoro, and our resolution had passed, they had the option of giving up their lobbying business and putting their full-time effort into the LNP or into the Liberal Party. And that's what we want to demand of these people. We don't want part-timers, as Tony Abbott said. We want full-time commitment.
Now, your involvement in this fight to rid party officialdom of paid lobbyists began with your approach to Tony Abbott. Can you now tell us the full story of what happened in that confrontation, what happened in that meeting?
Well, I must confess that as a delegate for the Queensland delegation, I was remiss. I didn't submit the resolutions that the Queensland delegation had passed at their state council meeting about paid political lobbyists, and I had little knowledge of it. When I realised that they hadn't been submitted, I called my secretary and asked her to draft off a resolution and send it straight down to the Secretariat, because I had been remiss in getting it there in time, and I indeed hadn't seen it. And of course, unfortunately, for some mysterious reason, it went to the Federal Director of the Liberal Party, and I'd previously arranged to meet Mr Abbott in Melbourne at 6 o'clock because I am an ordinary member of the party, and he does like to talk to ordinary members, to his credit. And I got there at 6 o'clock and I started having a conversation with him about various things, and it was very amicable. And of course, Mr Abbott had a very violent reaction to that resolution and said that he wasn't going to let it be put in relation to any affect our Vice President or President. Now, it was unknown to me at the time that our Vice President and President, I didn't even know that Mr Santoro was the Federal Vice President.
What did he actually say to you? You talk about a violent reaction. What did he actually say?
Well, I think he may have raised his voice at me. I guess when people raise their voice at me, I normally stop hearing because I'm normally raising my voice at higher than they can. And I think that's the sort of environment that we're in, and where we both singly had different points of view. I was there believing I must protect and defend and carry through the rights of the party in Queensland to put a resolution at federal conference and to be considered. And I think that Tony Abbott took that to be very personal against a number of people, which I didn't think it was. And when it was put to council, it wasn't put in the way I would have put it. That, look at the words of the resolution, look at the proposition that people who take money from companies, foreign and others, regardless of what their views are, to do their bidding, should not be our president's vice presidents. I thought it was as clear as night and day. I was puzzled why it wasn't accepted.
It was a little more than just raised voices, though, wasn't it?
Well, I did swear, and I would say now that I did say a number of four-lettered words, and I apologise to Mr Abbott for that. I was very badly behaved. I know he was there like a saint the whole time, according to the media reports, and of course I can't recall what happened because I I was in such a outrageous situation that this matter couldn't be put, and I didn't listen to what he had to say, unfortunately.
Was there any physical intimidation or any violence or any threat of violence?
Well, I think I did have some difficulty in leaving the room, but that was resolved fairly amicably. I'm a heavyweight, as you know, Tony, and Tony Abbott's only a lightweight, despite winning a blue.
What do you mean difficulty in leaving the room? How did that manifest itself?
I think I might have bumped. We might have been in a collision path if we'd both walked forward at one stage, but fortunately that never happened.
Are you suggesting he tried to stop you from leaving?
Oh, I think it's, my time's pretty busy, and Mr Abbott obviously is very keen to hear what I've got to say and wanted to keep me longer than my appointments would allow. So, I can well understand that, and I accept that, and that's a reasonable aspect. But I've got to get on with life and get things moving, which is what I'm trying to do now.
Yes, no, but physically, did he actually physically try and restrain you? Seriously?
I can't recall that, Tony, but I do recall I did raise my voice, and I'm sorry about that.
Did Tony Abbott accuse you of bullying by any chance?
Well, I think he has accused me of that, and I've always tried to be fair to people, but I don't think I'm a bully. But I'll just like to show you the newspaper here. I'm on the newspaper over here in Tahiti Nui. They're happy to see me here. And inside the newspaper, we've got all the presidents of the world and that I'll be talking to, who are interested in good corporate governance and interested in limiting the role of lobbyists. They think it's a good idea. I think it's a good idea. It's good that the news is interested in what I'm saying. I just wish the Liberal Party was more interested.
since you're travelling the world a bit like a world leader at the moment, talking to world leaders, did it ever cross your mind at all that you might have the potential yourself to become Prime Minister one day?
Well, no, Tony. I think if I went into Parliament, I've got no ambition for myself personally to be a minister or a Prime Minister. I've had a good life. I've done a lot of things, but you know, whatever way I can serve the country, I certainly will.
With all that business experience you keep talking about, wouldn't you logically make, at the very least, a serious candidate for the ministry?
Well, I don't know. It's for other people to judge than me. I'm sure there's a lot of shadow ministers, and I'm sure you could talk to Tony Abbott about that. Tony's a great judge. I'd like to say a cheerio to Mr Abbott if he's watching and wish him all the best and say he's a great leader, and I'm sure we'll get an election next time, and I'm happy to be. I just want to be one day part of his team so that I can look up to him or down, whatever this case may be, and see that he does well.
Yes, well, one final question before you go, and that is, what happens with your business interests if you do get into Parliament? Do you have to put it all in a blind trust, let someone else run the whole thing?
No, I don't think so. I don't know whether I'm that active in it anyway. I've got over 2,500 employees in Queensland. I mean, my activity really is in ideas and concepts, and you tend to think wherever you are, and the managers that are running the business will continue to run the business if I was in Parliament. And I'd personally devote 100% of my time to the people of Australia, seeing if we can get the economy right, see if we can get some goals to go forward the economy. It's not good enough just to drift into office. You've got to have an agenda. You've got to have a program. I'm sure the Liberal Party's got that, and they'll make a difference.
Clive Palmer in Tahiti, looking very much like you are in Tahiti as well. We thank you very much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to talk to you, Tony. Australia's #1 journalist. All the best.